Greetings, y'all. Before we get into this last episode of the Flipping the Script series, I just wanted to let you know I'll be off during the month of October. The podcast will return in November for our final season of 2021, Young, Gifted, Black, and Disabled. The best way to be sure you don't miss any of this is to make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcast app. The next season starts in November, but you never know. I may have something to say in October. Now, let's kick it, man.
Okay, party people in the house, you're about to witness something you've never witnessed before.
Hey, Theo, tell us a story.
Listen carefully.
Once upon a time, in the 1980s, kids like me, our parents said we was crazy. Hanging in the park or in front of our building. Doing nothing wrong. We were just children. Sometimes we had music, and it would be rocking. If not, someone was beatboxing. All of a sudden, someone would start rapping. Break out the cardboard, it's time for break dancing. These were the early days of hip-hop. Back then, most adults said it would stop. Today, please, it's an unstoppable force. Fashion, movies, entertainment, of course. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention? This episode, we share a whole new dimension. Pump up the volume, I need y'all to listen. Flipping the script. Flipping the script on audio description.
Oh my God.
Read.
My mind.
Read.
My mind.
I'm a firm believer that wherever possible, we should be having audio description as part of the main soundscape for any kind of artistic endeavor, not just for television or film.
That's Nathan Gearing, accessibility innovator and my guest today. He's the director of the Rationale Method and the registered charity Rationale Arts.
I am 6'1". I have an Afro-Caribbean heritage from Antigua and Jamaica, and also British and Romani Gypsy heritage on my other side of the family. I have a short afro hair, slightly longer on top, but there's tight afro curls. I have a beard. A sound that would go along with the texture of my beard is kind of like a rough, coarse texture. I'm wearing a grey t-shirt, which has Move More on one side, which is in white and yellow lettering. The texture of the t-shirt is very like so very kind of like smooth. I'll go by the pronouns of he or him.
Nathan didn't mention that he's also a breakdancer, and that's where this story begins.
I grew up watching old school kung fu movies with my grandmother and the rest of my family. And when I would be falling asleep, I could still picture the movements of the kung fu fight based on the sound effects from the kung fu movie. So you could tell like a punch or a kick, or if it had landed like
The study of kung fu fighting is ongoing. Don't ever hope to master all of them. So be careful.
Thank you for your advice.
Then please forgive me.
Before we get to the sound effects, let's hear more about the dancing.
I studied kung fu as a kid, and then I was a b-boy from like my early 20s. I did a couple of breaking moves as a kid, but I never really had anybody to teach me breaking. Then I went to university, and then there was like a breaking society there. Within a couple months, because of my approach with kung fu, I ended up teaching a class. I picked up a lot of movements like really quickly, and then from there I ended up being like an internationally touring performer. I worked with a guy in the UK called John ZD, who runs a big hip-hop theatre festival called Breaking Convention.
He soon started his own hip-hop theater company called Rationale. The company's approach to developing their performances is interactive. It starts with what Nathan calls a scratch performance.
We show the audience certain scenes, and then they'll give feedback based on those scenes. Based on that feedback, we'll further develop our show. This one particular time, we just didn't have enough material.
So they borrowed an idea from another company called New Art Club. It sort of creates a stop animation performance, or creating what appears to be movement from still images.
We decided to remix that and do a hip-hop version. So when the audience would open their eyes, we'd be stood upright, and then when they close their eyes and open their eyes again, we'd be upside down, spinning on our head, or jumping up and down on one hand, or doing freezes and poses. And the audience went crazy for it. We couldn't believe that we got such a profound response from just kind of like taking the audience's sight away and bringing it back. So we decided that we were going to really focus on the theme of visual impairment. But so on a real superficial level,
that superficial turned into a real genuine interest after one of the members of the company explained how any of them could really be impacted by blindness.
And then that's when it really hit home to me. My daughter at the time, she was about 2 years old. And I thought, what if I was to wake up tomorrow and I couldn't see my daughter? And I wasn't emotionally prepared for that, if I'm honest. I was a mess. I broke down in tears and I was really afraid. With me, if I'm afraid of something, I develop a curiosity about it. And so I decided to find out as much as I could about visual impairment in depth.
We often talk about the correlation between the limited opportunities for people who are blind or have low vision and the fear associated with blindness. So I can't help but wonder, what if the default response to that fear was more like Nathan's?
I want to be able to get to know myself as a human being as best I possibly can. I became quite aware in my 20s that if I'm afraid of something, that fear can stop me living a happy and fulfilling life. And just because I'm afraid of something, it may be because actually I don't know enough about it. And obviously you can find great beauty on the other side of fear, but sometimes you just have to go through fear. Sometimes it's good to tolerate uncertainty. I would say to anybody out there, if there's something that you're afraid of, develop a curiosity about it, because you may find some incredible things, not only about yourself, but also about the thing that you're actually afraid of, and it will help you grow as a human being. We just had so many incredible discoveries that it became my life's work. The more I found out, the more I was just inspired.
In case this sounds like using disability as a gimmick,
I don't think so.
We worked with blind and partially sighted communities every step of the way. It was really great that they were willing to come on this journey with us, because it meant that we were getting the information straight from the people that needed these provisions. They were helping us shape it and develop it, and we were always in consultation with them.
Nathan worked with various blindness organizations where he met all sorts of people with varying degrees of blindness and low vision. He asked why more blind people weren't attending performances and what he could do about that.
They say they need the dynamics of the movement to change quite abruptly, from wide to narrow or high to low. It's not the case with every type of vision impairment, but some kinds of vision impairment, the audience see better when they look down towards the floor, because the floor gives such a blank canvas for contrast. I was like, oh, okay, well, where does most breaking happen? On the floor. We worked with a visually impaired playwright called Kate O'Reilly. She sees the world in 2D, so the world's like a flat picture to her. She said that when she watched my company break in person, she said she got an experience of what it was like to see in 3D. Something gave her a sense of depth and perception that she didn't see in any other art form. She thinks it's something to do with the axis which we were spinning at with our power moves, or the kind of non-typical positions we put our bodies in when we do freezes or poses. She thinks her brain's trying to make sense of that.
Blind people in the audience? That's one thing. With help from Kate, Nate sought out blind breakers, but couldn't find any. He wanted to do more than include blind performers in his show. He wanted to provide value.
I realized that breaking actually has increased my spatial awareness. And because with breaking, we have go down, so we go from standing to the floor very quickly, but we do that in very stylish ways, but also in very safe ways. We teach people how to sustain their momentum and keep moving and keep rolling. And a lot of injuries happen when somebody falls and all the shock gets absorbed into one part of their body. We teach them how to sustain the momentum, and within their fall, the force gets dissipated for a larger surface area of the body. So it means that it greatly reduces the chance of injuries.
In addition to schools and organizations for the blind, he taught these lessons at the Royal Opera House. During the pandemic, he began teaching one-on-one classes online via Zoom.
I have a blind student that can't speak that I teach in Italy. We communicate through, obviously, my verbal directions and his hand signals. We're still able to have that dialogue and to be able to teach him the techniques effectively.
And you work with adults and children?
Oh, yeah. So I think the youngest kid we work with is 6. And the oldest person we've worked with is about 73, 74, I want to say. We have them doing CCs and Zulu spins and handstands. So it's a real intergenerational style.
As far as attending these performances, Nathan began to learn that the audio description provided just wasn't doing it for these consumers.
In the UK, it was common practice for the audio description to be really objective. The way it was delivered was almost like a science experiment. There was a monotone voice. The dancer lifts her arm, moves her head to the side. Art is subjective. If you have that objective voice coming in over it, it can be quite disturbing and take you out of the immersive artistic experience.
So what does Nathan do?
I again turn to hip hop. What are the more vocal elements of hip hop, obviously we have like MCing, rapping, beatboxing, vocal percussion. I started to pair like beatboxing sound effects with certain movements. We got people with visual impairment to physicalize each sound effect the beatboxer makes. So for example, if the majority of people were saying that represents a jump, we'd always use that for a jump, or represents like a low spin to the floor, we'd always use that as to represent a low spin to the floor. So we created our own language, which is known as RM notation, so rationale method notation, a way of giving people a richer soundscape. Within these sound effects, you can get an idea of like the speed of a movement, or if a movement is traveling from like high to low, all those kinds of directional input that it would take a very long time to describe through words.
Explain to me the name Rationale Method.
It came from my theatre company called Rationale. Rationale means a reason or a way. And we were like, we will always find a way and a reason for doing good in the world. We find the way to bridge the gap between disabled and non-disabled artists and audiences across the world.
The Rationale Method also includes poetic elements. The goal is to provide a choice of aesthetics for implementing immersive, non-objective audio description.
There's tons of audio description companies that deliver like objective audio description. We're not saying that what we're doing is a substitute for that. We're just trying to offer choice. Everybody's different. Everybody has different tastes. Some people will prefer objective audio description. Some people prefer subjective. Some people prefer like beatboxing. Some people prefer poetic. Some people prefer emotive text. We're just trying to open up the choice of what is available to blind and partially sighted audiences.
The applications go beyond dance and artistic performances.
It can be used to describe like sport. If you were to have a basketball game or a football game or a soccer game, you can have an excited commentator delivering the commentary, but you don't know, for example, if a ball is being passed from one person to another, how long it takes for that pass to travel from one person to another, if it's a high pass or a low pass. But with the sound effects that we have, you can give a person an idea of how long it takes the ball to travel from one person to another, how quickly a person's running based on the sound effects used.
Nathan couldn't speak about the details for such an application, but he's working on something that, in his words, if it comes to fruition,
it's going to be big.
And I know you can't talk about it too much, but is that something that would be over TV, or is that like live in the venue or something?
So we're looking at both. Something that would happen over TV. We're looking at a live element as well. Now, obviously, with a live element, there may be like a slight split second of delay in terms of reaction times.
Right.
But it wouldn't be enough to disrupt the experience. But again, when we go to the post-production and the edits, we can then tighten those elements up.
I don't really watch sports, but this does sound intriguing.
He swings the rope in circular motion side to side, around and across his body, then dives into an L-kick, transitioning into wind.
Another example of the Rationale Method at work is in a short film titled Still a Slave. It pairs emotive poetry and sound effects as subjective audio description. The film itself runs about 5 minutes and is directed, written, and stars Nathan. It comes out of the same energy as the Black Lives Matter movement and all of the trauma that was resurfaced after the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor.
There was a lot of throwaway comments on social media from people saying that all lives matter, slavery doesn't exist anymore. These were really kind of like gaslighting comments and painful comments. It was getting to the point where I was like, this is going to consume me if I don't transform this energy.
Nathan incorporates breakdancing, fire, and rope to convey his message. In line with his martial arts background, he redirects that negative energy from the social media comments to reveal them for what they are. Another key element of the film is the setting.
I shot it in Morecambe, which is one of Britain's oldest slave ports. The body of the first black slave is actually buried in Morecambe. It's called like Sambo's grave. So I was harnessing the energy from that space.
Combining the art with the activism, Nathan included a live performance of Still a Slave during a peaceful protest he organized outside a venue in his home city of Sheffield.
I'd made sure that I'd audio described all of the images leading up to the protest. I wanted to ensure that the protest was accessible. So many people that organize protests that don't think about the accessibility elements of a protest. If you have physical content, is that physical content audio described? Do you have a sign language interpreter there? If there's people with neurological differences, is there like a space that they can go to where it's not so noisy or not so hectic? If you're doing a march, is it an accessible route on the march that a wheelchair user can take within the protest?
The response from the blind community?
Thank you. because of this, we were able to take part in activism in a way that we typically don't get to take part in activism due to the inaccessibility that some protests have. For me, it was really important when I did Still a Slave to ensure that it was made accessible to as many people as possible when I made the film. I'm a firm believer that wherever possible, we should be having audio description as part of the main soundscape for any kind of artistic endeavor, not just for television or film. It was thought of right from the inception of the production. I always knew I wanted to have audio description.
That's the goal we always strive for, being considered at the point of creation or design. In this case, the choice of aesthetic from the Rationale Method toolbox was poetry, along with enhanced sound design.
I beefed up some of the sound effects from the fire, just so, again, you got a bit of an idea of kind of like, the speed at which the fire was spinning and traveling from one point to another. We worked with an incredible audio describer called Shinga Matewe, and she provided the beautiful poetry, and I kind of like coached her in terms of what elements we needed to focus on to make it more accessible and what dynamics she needed to add to her voice at certain parts. I made sure that the person I worked with to do the audio description, she came from African descent. I also made sure that the person that tracked the sound score, that he came from African descent as well, just to make sure that there was authenticity running right through the course of the entire short film and production.
Hey, what's up, family? I need to interrupt the episode for a brief moment. I hope you enjoy these as much as I enjoy bringing them to you. I really want to make this podcast a sustainable venture. Will you help me? All I need is a bit of your time. Please, go on over to readmymind.com and check out the post for this episode and hit the link that says survey. It takes about 5 minutes to fill that out.
Check it out, y'all.
Read My Mind Radio has merch, t-shirts, and more on sale now. Show your support for the Flipping the Script series directly, or show your love for the podcast with an official Read My Mind Radio t-shirt, hoodie, cap, or more. Just go on over to readmymind.com and hit the link that says shop. I appreciate you, family. And now,
what we're gonna do right here is go
back to the episode. Both the blind and the non-blind communities responded favorably, never seeing this kind of approach before. The non-blind community acknowledging that it also adds an extra layer for them to understand what's happening. And that venue in Sheffield, they decided to begin adding more programming from people of color on their main stage, and that includes locally within the city of Sheffield. This includes a performance from Nathan's Rationale Company.
We did a hip-hop theatre production called Trust in Care. That production was made with young people in care as our artistic consultants on the production. We'd work with them on some artistic residencies, and then we'd create scenes with them, and then they'd watch the scenes back and be like, nah, that doesn't represent me. Or they'd be like, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. And so based on that, that's how we created the production. Audio description, again, was for everybody to hear.
No headphone and receiver? Open audio description?
We set the parameters at the beginning of the production.
That's right. They did a pre-show for all attendees. The cast was invited out along with the audio describer and the British Sign Language interpreter.
We were like, you're going to have this unique technique, Rationale Method of audio description and accessibility. It's going to be fully embedded, and you may hear certain elements that you feel, why are you stating the obvious? But we have to remember that there's blind and partially sighted audience members here. So these elements are key in order to ensure that everybody has the same level of access. Some of you sighted people may actually get a deeper understanding. It may just heighten accessibility for you as well. We explained that the BSL sign language interpretation was fully integrated within the performance. So we had the sign language interpreter dancing throughout the whole production. We sold out the venue. We got a standing ovation. It was just a massive hit.
That open audio description even helped a blind cast member who became disoriented while on stage.
The audio describer would literally be guiding her back to her space and where she needs to be to help her get a sense of direction or a sense of bearings within the audio description. And because it was there for everybody to hear, it enabled the blind performer to be able to safely navigate the space without taking away from the aesthetic. So people got a chance to see that firsthand in terms of audio description being used as a form of accessibility for performers as well as for audience members. It was incredible.
When something is new and starts to receive a level of attention and success, two things are likely to happen. First, people want to learn how they can implement it.
I've just been teaching like the accessibility techniques to some organizations out in Peru in terms of how they can enhance accessibility, not only through the Rationale Method, but also through creative techniques within audio description. what I really believe to be the case is like there's loads of ways that people can get creative with audio description. We're just scratching the surface. I'm trying to give people the tools in terms of how to kind of like unlock their own creativity and to try and tap into their authentic self, to give them the tools in terms of, okay, how they may go about enhancing accessibility in a variety of ways. So not just with the rationale method, but again, hopefully they'll be able to unlock their own technique. The rationale method is just another alternative. It's not a one size fits all. I think there's enough room for everybody. And the more choice that we can provide for people, the better.
Are you getting love from the other audio description companies, or are they hating?
Well, it's really funny. It's a mixed bag. We got the audio description company in Canada, the main audio description organization. They're giving us nothing but love. Even though the rationale method has its roots deeply embedded in hip hop, it doesn't mean that the aesthetic that you will get will be a hip hop aesthetic. We've audio described like award-winning contemporary dance and like ballet and even children's short films. Just because it has its roots in hip hop doesn't mean that the aesthetic is going to always be hip hop. Sometimes it will be if that's what it calls for. One of the main audio description companies here in the UK, I approached them when I first started out, can we partner on this? And they were just like, nothing. I've tried to reach out since and nothing again. For me, I'm not competing with anybody. I'm just here just trying to do my part. We got hate because they know what we're doing is dope. That's fine.
That's when you know you're doing something good.
Play on, play on.
Haters are always going to hate.
No diggity, no doubt.
Nathan really does have greater aspirations, which include visions of the future of audio description.
For example, people could turn on the TV and they have a button for audio description and they have about 10 different aesthetics that they can choose from that suits their particular personality or taste or style. For so long, it's always been one size fits all for audio description for when there's a production or a performance.
Talking technology.
There's an event I run called Demystifying Tech, where we get people to play with both cutting edge technologies and basic technologies. There's so many artists that are scared of technology and working with it, but we just try and demystify some of these preconceptions and talk about how we can utilize them to enhance accessibility in a variety of ways.
This is a journey into sound.
Nathan's working on incorporating the sounds into a pad that can be triggered, essentially taking the language of the rationale method, which pairs sound to movement, and making it easily available to anyone, blind or not, at any time.
Then either a sighted or blind dancers can interpret those sounds, and then all of a sudden you're opening up career pathways for blind and partially sighted choreographers and movement directors. I don't think it's because that they don't want to. I think it's more so because they haven't had an accessible pathway created for them to be able to do that. We're just finishing the second stage of prototyping and we've had like incredible responses so far. We've had people saying that, if I had this in college, I would have passed my drama and dance exams.
Sounds as language, a means of communicating, enabling a blind choreographer to easily relay their idea, or conversely, a blind dancer to perform a certain move.
For example, if you were to do a Zulu spin is if somebody is crouched low to the floor and they're spinning on the floor with both their hands and their feet in contact with the floor, but they're keeping a tight ball. So a Zulu spin was like, so you get an idea of how fast the spin would happen.
Again, the applications go beyond dancing. Maybe a blind martial artist, an actor, or athlete.
Also, fashion shows, if people can get a feel of, I guess, the energy of the person walking down the catwalk, and then if they're spinning around and they've got a floaty dress on or a different style of dress, the sound effects can also reflect the movement quality of the dress as well. There's lots of applications that this sound pad can be used for. Just in the second lot of prototyping, then hopefully after that, we're going to do a bit more triangulation in terms of research. Hopefully we'll be able to get it to production and get it out to people in the world. Hopefully we'll be able to have more blind and partially sighted directors and choreographers.
Assuring value for those who are blind and disabled was always part of Nathan's objective.
Me not being disabled myself, I had a lot of skepticism from the disabled community coming into it, and quite rightly so. Once they talk to me and understand actually this guy's coming from a genuine place, it's just been nothing but love from the disabled community since, really, which I'm eternally grateful for.
That relationship and understanding the importance of centering the community is probably one reason Nathan was selected to coordinate the opening ceremony of the 2017 Special Olympics.
I was adamant that the non-disabled companies and artists, they weren't about to impose their choreography on the disabled artists. It had to be a disability-led opening ceremony. The people with disabilities, they would take the lead on what movements they wanted and what themes they wanted to explore. The non-disabled artists, they would fit in their choreography around, and it would just be a real mix, but it was disability-led. There'd been other breakers that had performed in opening ceremonies, like the New York City Breakers had done it in the 80s. But I made history as the first ever b-boy to be in charge of an entire Olympic opening ceremony. So that was kind of like a big achievement for hip-hop.
So it sounds like you have a lot of the elements of hip-hop kind of incorporated into what you're doing.
Yeah, my root was hip-hop. I know how hip-hop can save lives. So I'd always look to hip-hop first. We hadn't even begun to scratch the surface on what hip-hop can really do.
Through his charity, or Rationale Arts, Nathan's incorporating the elements of hip-hop, rapping or MCing, breakdancing, graffiti or street art, DJing, and the final one, knowledge of self, all to help hospitalized children.
We work in children's hospitals, and we teach bedside beatboxing skills, hip-hop hand play, hand dance movements. We teach them smashing street art, graffiti writing, how to write their own name. Doctor Decks, where somebody's dressed up in doctor scrubs and pushes like a trolley around the ward and has like DJ decks on them and teaches the kids how to mix and scratch. There's so many great accessibility elements with that. A beatboxer's best friend can be a loop station.
Okay, for those who may not be familiar, a loop station is a recording device that repeats or loops a sound at a given tempo when recorded.
With people that have trouble forming speech, we can sample their voice into that, and then that can be then part of the main soundscape that we create within that loop station. And if they want to, they can trigger their voice whenever they want it to come on and off.
Working directly with the children in real situations helped Nathan really understand the value of this work.
We're actually teaching these kids like distress tolerance and emotional regulation. Beatboxing is just meditation, because meditation is controlled breathing. We're teaching these kids life skills through these elements of hip-hop in ways that people wouldn't normally think that hip-hop can help people's lives, even down to the graffiti writing. We even teach them how powerful and important it is to put in your intention, even down to how you hold your pen. If you want to write your name and you're holding your pen all sloppy, then your name's going to come out sloppy, and that's how you're presenting yourself to the world. Where if you put your emotional intention, everything, your heart and soul into it, even just that, how you hold your pen, you're going to give not only yourself, but the world the best representation of yourself. I'm just trying to spread as much knowledge as possible in terms of ways in how we can utilize hip hop to enhance people's quality of life.
This truly does go back to the essence of hip hop culture.
Within hip hop, originality is so important. Everybody talks about original style, original flow and all that kind of thing. But the originality of thought is something that we're really trying to push with this. This is a hip-hop approach to accessibility and inclusion.
And you don't stop.
Smooth it out now.
And Nathan Gearing, brother, you are now official, okay?
Go.
Member of the Read My Mind radio family. Give me some contact information, brother. Where can people check you out, get in contact, all of that?
If you want to check out the work that my charity does, www.rationalearts.com. If you're interested in the audio description service and provision, that's www.rationalemethod.com. Instagram, it's just Rationale Arts or Rationale Method, or just my name, Nathan Gearing. On Twitter, Rationale Arts again, or at Method Rationale for the audio description stuff that we do. Facebook, Rationale Arts. If y'all want to hit me up via email, nathan@rationalemethod.com.
You can check out Still a Slave during the 2021 Superfest Film Festival. You know, the premier disability film festival that you can attend online. All you have to do is point that handy-dandy browser of yours over to superfestfilm.com. There are multiple options there for tickets, and they fit in all budgets, just like Read My Mind Radio, which, by the way, is available for only $3.99 wherever you like to consume podcasts. Plus, we have transcripts and more over at readmymind.com. And so there's no confusion. Like a true MC, I spell it out. R to the E, I,
D, and that's me in a place to be.
Like my last name.
Weren't you just using the Wu-Tang School method against me?
Wicked.
Peace.